Kenya is on fire. Not literally, of course, but the streets are burning with anger. The air is thick with the cries of thousands who have taken to the streets, their voices echoing through the cities and towns. The atmosphere is charged with a palpable sense of urgency and frustration. Protests have erupted across the nation. From Nairobi to Mombasa, from Kisumu to Eldoret, the people are united in their demand for change. The sheer scale of these demonstrations is unprecedented, with people from all walks of life joining in. People are fed up. They are tired of the high cost of living. Prices of basic commodities have skyrocketed, making it difficult for the average Kenyan to make ends meet. They want change. They are calling for immediate action to address the economic hardships that have plagued the nation for years. The government, led by President William Ruto, is facing its biggest challenge yet. The administration is under immense pressure to respond to the people's demands. The president's policies and leadership are being scrutinized like never before. These protests are not just about economics, though. They are about something much deeper. The people are expressing their dissatisfaction with the entire system. They feel neglected and unheard by those in power. They are about something much deeper. The grievances run deep, touching on issues of corruption, inequality, and lack of opportunities. The youth in particular are frustrated with the lack of jobs and the bleak prospects for their future. Kenyans are yearning for a different kind of future. They envision a country where their voices are heard, where their leaders are accountable, and where there is hope for a better tomorrow. They are fighting for a future where their children can thrive. They are demanding better governance, transparency, and accountability. The call for reform is loud and clear. The people want an end to corruption and mismanagement. They are demanding that their leaders be held accountable for their actions. The situation is volatile, unpredictable. The tension in the air is palpable, and there is a sense that anything could happen at any moment. The protests have been largely peaceful, but there's always the risk of violence breaking out. It feels like something big is about to happen. The world is watching. International media has turned its gaze towards Kenya, and global leaders are paying close attention to the unfolding events. The outcome of these protests could have far-reaching implications. Will Kenya become another tragic example of African instability? The stakes are high, and the future of the nation hangs in the balance. The protests have highlighted the fragility of the political and economic systems in place. Or could this be the spark that ignites a new wave of democratic change across the continent? The courage and determination of the Kenyan people could inspire similar movements in other African nations. This could be the beginning of a new era of accountability and governance in Africa. The world waits with bated breath to see what will unfold next. Let's be real, nobody likes paying more for stuff. It's a universal truth that transcends borders and cultures. Whether you're in New York, Tokyo, or Nairobi, the sentiment is the same. But when you're already struggling to make ends meet, every price hike feels like a punch to the gut, especially when you're already struggling to make ends meet. Imagine having to choose between buying food or paying for your child's school fees. This is the harsh reality for many families in Kenya today. In Kenya, the cost of basic necessities has skyrocketed. We're talking about essentials like maize flour, cooking oil, and even vegetables. Prices have doubled, sometimes even tripled in a matter of months. Food prices are through the roof. Fuel costs are insane. The ripple effect is felt across the board. Transport costs have surged, making it even more expensive to get goods to market. This, in turn, drives prices even higher. People are struggling to put food on the table. It's not just about cutting back on luxuries, it's about survival. Families are skipping meals and children are going to bed hungry. Imagine this. You wake up and your money is worth less than it was yesterday. The Kenyan shilling has been losing value, making imported goods even more expensive. It's a vicious cycle that's hard to break. That's the reality for many Kenyans. The economic challenges are not just numbers on a spreadsheet, they are real, tangible hardships that affect everyday life. Inflation is out of control. The cost of living is rising faster than wages, leaving people with less and less purchasing power. It's a crisis that has been building for years. The government's response? not enough, according to the protesters. They are demanding more action, more support, and more accountability. They want to see real, tangible changes that will make a difference in their lives. This economic crisis has pushed people to their breaking point. The frustration is palpable, and the anger is real. People are tired of empty promises and want to see real change. It's like a pressure cooker that's been simmering for years and now it's finally exploded. The protests are a manifestation of years of pent-up frustration and anger. The people of Kenya are demanding a better future and they won't stop until they get it. Remember the Arab Spring? Yeah, that whole throwing out dictators via Twitter phase? It started with a Tunisian street vendor setting himself on fire. Then boom, protests spread like wildfire across North Africa and the Middle East. Kenya's protests feel eerily similar. Same anger, same frustration, same yearning for a better future. The slogans are different, but the message is the same. Enough is enough. Now, I'm not saying Kenya is about to have its own Tahrir Square moment, but there are definitely parallels. The world is watching to see if history will repeat itself. To understand these protests, you need to understand Kenya's history. Corruption, ethnic divisions, rigged elections. It's a greatest hits album of political dysfunction. For decades, a small elite has held on to power, enriching themselves at the expense of ordinary Kenyans. The current government promised change, but many feel let down. They see the same old patterns of corruption and cronyism playing out. This isn't just about economics, it's about a broken political system. Kenyans are demanding a voice, a say in how their country is run. They want a government that works for them, not against them. Section 5. Beyond the economy, social unrest and inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor in Kenya is wider than a giraffe's neck. You've got billionaires driving Maseratis, while others are struggling to afford a loaf of bread. This inequality breeds resentment and frustration. Young people in particular feel locked out of opportunities. They see a system that's rigged against them and they're demanding something better. It's not just about money though. It's about access to basic services, healthcare, education, clean water. It's about having a fair shot at a decent life. Section 6. A continent on edge. The ripple effect of Kenya's protests. Kenya is a regional powerhouse. What happens there doesn't stay there. Neighbouring countries are watching nervously. If Kenya descends into chaos, it could have a domino effect across East Africa. Think refugee crises, economic instability, and the spread of violence. On the other hand, if Kenya's protests lead to positive change, it could inspire similar movements across the continent. It could be a beacon of hope, a model for other African nations struggling with similar problems. Section 7. The people have had enough. Voices from the ground. Don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from the people on the ground. We are tired of empty promises, says Mama Mboga, a vegetable seller in Nairobi. All we want is a chance to provide for our families. John, a university student, echoes her sentiment. This is about our future, he says. We want jobs, we want opportunities, we want a government that listens to us. These voices are not isolated incidents. They represent a growing chorus of discontent across Kenya. Section 8. The government's response, crackdowns and concessions. So how has the government responded to all this chaos? The situation in Kenya has been nothing short of tumultuous, with waves of protests sweeping across the nation. The government's response has been multifaceted, aiming to address the unrest while maintaining order. Well, it's a mixed bag. The reactions from the public have been varied, reflecting the complexity of the issues at hand. Some see the government's actions as necessary, while others view them as heavy-handed and insufficient. On one hand, they've deployed riot police, tear gas, the whole shebang. The streets have seen a significant presence of law enforcement aiming to quell the protests and restore a semblance of normalcy. These measures, however, have not been without controversy. On the other hand, they've also announced some concessions, like promising to lower the cost of living eventually. These promises are aimed at addressing some of the root causes of the unrest, such as economic hardship and rising living costs. But will it be enough to appease the protesters? Skepticism runs high among the demonstrators. many of whom doubt the government's commitment to real change. They question whether these promises will translate into tangible improvements in their daily lives. The government is walking a tightrope. They must navigate the delicate balance between maintaining order and addressing the legitimate grievances of the populace. This balancing act is fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls. Crack down too hard, and they risk inflaming the situation further. Heavy-handed tactics can lead to more anger and resentment, potentially escalating the protests and leading to more violence. But give in too much, and they risk appearing weak and emboldening the opposition. Concessions must be carefully calibrated to avoid giving the impression that the government can be easily swayed by public pressure. It's a high-stakes game of political chess, where every move is scrutinized and can have far-reaching consequences. The government's strategy must be both firm and flexible, capable of adapting to the evolving situation. And the stakes couldn't be higher. The outcome of this crisis will shape the future of Kenya, influencing its political landscape and the relationship between the government and its citizens.